It's Saturday, October 10th. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blancolirio channel. And in some recent interviews on CNBC, the question came up, why does it take the airlines so long to recover from furloughs once furloughs begin? So from a pilot's perspective, I'm going to help explain the whole entire process, the training process, something that I'm going through right now, and why it takes so long for an airline to recover from furloughing pilots. On the 1st of October, the CARES Act expired, and that CARES Act came with strings attached. Part of the strings that were attached to that money from the government for airlines is that they could not furlough any employees, and in exchange for not furloughing any employees with some other strings attached, they could not reduce service to any of the cities in their network. Well, that date is expired. No additional packages come through Congress, and so the airlines have to right size. They are beginning to furlough pilots, and they are beginning to reduce service to some of the cities along their routes. TSA air travel statistics here in the United States indicate that air travel is only 30 to 39% of what it was before COVID-19 hit. So as these pilot furloughs begin, it begins a whole cascade of events that are going to take the major airlines here in the United States at least 12 to potentially 15 months to completely recover from, if flying should return all the way back to pre-COVID levels. And here's why. The airline industry is a highly regulated industry and a highly unionized labor force. Each aircraft, as we learned in the 737 MAX, has a single type certificate. Each pilot has an individual type certificate rating to fly one aircraft. One pilot can only be type rated and current and qualified in one aircraft at a time. Even though I've got type certificate ratings from the 727 all the way up to the Boeing 777 and darn near everything in between, I can only be current and qualified in one aircraft at a time. And right now I'm going through requalification training for the Boeing 777. Each training footprint, the overall amount of time it takes to get a pilot trained, can take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks, depending on what kind of training he needs, regardless of whether he's coming back from a furlough or switching aircraft. And as those of you familiar with the airline industry know, there's only one thing of importance in the industry, and that is your seniority number. As a pilot for the airlines, your seniority number determines everything. It determines the quality of your entire career. And what is your seniority number? It is simply the date that you were hired by that airline in conjunction with how old you were on that date, because airline pilots have a mandatory retirement at age 65. So now we have a bunch of different aircraft and pilots that each require an individual type certificate rating to fly, and we have to marry that together with the union seniority system, and this is done through the 4-part bid status. The 4-part bid status consists of 1, the aircraft; 2, the seat, captain or FO; 3, the base, as each airline has different pilot bases throughout its system; and 4, whether it's domestic or an international qualification. Now this 4th one is slowly being eliminated, as everybody is going to be in the future eventually international qualified. So you basically have this 3-part bid status that you got to satisfy, and that's what creates this cascade of seniority. Why a cascade of seniority? Because the most desirable jobs, the best paying jobs, are to be that wide body captain of the highest seniority at the top of the list. Where do the most junior pilots end up? At the bottom of the list, narrow body FOs. And when it comes time to furlough, you can only furlough by seniority. You cannot furlough by aircraft or base or anything else but by seniority number. And the majority of those junior pilots are down here on the narrow body FO list. So as they fall off the list, that creates a whole cascade of training events. All the way to the top of the list, the most junior wide body captain may very well have to displace down to wide body FO and or narrow body captain, and that in turn creates another displacement on down the list and all the way down to the bottom. The same thing when you go to repopulate this list, everybody has to come through training and fill up the list from the bottom up based on seniority. As I stated earlier, it takes for the individual pilot a 4 to potentially 8 week footprint to get that pilot back up to speed, and that's all based on how long he's been out of the cockpit. When did his currency expire? Well, there's two major currencies that pilots need to consider. One is landing currency. Every 90 days you got to have 3 landings. You can get that currency back in the sim, and that sim takes each pilot about 1 hour apiece. You can get three or 4 pilots in those sims and get them knocked out and recurrent in about a 4-hour simulator session. The longer currency requirement is check rides. Pilots are required to have a check ride every 9 months. When does a pilot turn into a pumpkin? And this is a rule that's not well understood even with inside the industry that I've found out for myself firsthand. It has nothing to do with the date of your last flight. It has to do with what was the date of your last check ride. You take the date of your last check ride, you add 9 months to that, that's when you turned into a pumpkin. From that date that you turned into a pumpkin, you then add a year, and whether you were out for less than a year or more than a year determines the amount of training that you will be required to have in order to get requalified in your aircraft. And those training footprints can vary in size. Now, when you try to remarry all those different bid statuses and repopulate all those different bid statuses all the way up the ladder, that's what can take nearly a year to 15 months. So I hope that explained a little bit about why furloughs take so long to recover from and why they cost so much money for the airlines to do, all the different training expenses, plus each pilot that gets furloughed gets a little bit of furlough pay, and it's not much, and why the whole endeavor costs money, especially for airlines that have a wide variety of aircraft. And hopefully, too, you learned a little bit more about how the airline industry worked. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for your support of this channel, and thanks so much for the support of those of you on Patreon that make this content possible. I got to get to work. See you here.